I recently received an email from a salesperson having challenges selling time tracking software. And a lot of these challenges are probably the same challenges that most or all salespeople are experiencing. So I'm going to create a video here going through his email, breaking down his challenges and questions, and providing a few tips for how he could improve results. Now, all of the tips I share in this video actually are explained in much more detail in our sales training program called the Smart Sales System, and there are modules that will completely outline all of the concepts that I'm going to skim the surface on in this video. One of the first things he mentions is that his software can do a lot more than his competition, but it lacks a USP, a unique selling proposition. If his software is different, then he definitely has a unique selling proposition. Our sales training program will actually help you to create your value proposition, and we do that by helping you to outline what your software does in terms of features, and then use each of those features to brainstorm the different benefits that each feature can help deliver in terms of what can it make work better for the prospect. If you want to create your unique selling proposition, then you need to look at how you're different from the competition and how you're unique from your competitors. And if you outline your differentiation, which he said that they're different in many ways, then you can go through our same brainstorming process to look at each way that you're different and ask yourself, how does that improve things for my prospect? And then you can come up with a second set of improvements, and value points that you can deliver to your prospect that are unique from your competition. And that is essentially your unique selling proposition. And what this second set of value points allows you to do is it allows you to have a second value proposition. So if you're talking to prospects that are not using anything today, you use your standard set of value points and your standard value proposition. If your prospect is using your competitor and you want to try to replace the competitor, then focus on the value that you can deliver on top of what the competitor is already doing. And you can do that by using your value proposition that's driven by your differentiation, how you're different from the competition. Then the salesperson goes on to mention that the prospects that he's talking to have no pain points and they have no issues with the current provider that they're working with. And my first thought and question here for the salesperson is, how are you going about talking about pain points with the prospects? How are you trying to learn about the pain points they have, or if they have the pain that your product or service can help to solve? And to drill into that a little bit more, do you have a list of pain points that your software can solve for the prospect that you're talking to? And if you don't, that same sales message brainstorming process will help you to build a list of pain points that you should be talking about with your prospect. And we do that by bringing back the improvements that we created for your value proposition, and we reverse engineer each of those value points to create a correlated set of pain points that your software can solve. This becomes the list of pain points that you should be talking about and looking for when you're talking to prospects. If you're talking to a lot of prospects that are using the competition's product, you want to focus on pain points that you can solve by replacing the competition's product with your product. And to help you create that list of pain points, we can bring back your unique selling proposition and the value points that are driven by how your software is different, and use that to create a set of pain points. So this will give us two sets of pain points. One set of pain points that's not using any software today, and then another set of pain points that someone might have if they're using the competition's product. And depending on what the prospect is doing or using today, that will determine which pain points we focus on. The other thing I would like to ask this salesperson is, how are they going about trying to ask the prospect about their pain points? Because yes, it's a step forward to look to see if the prospect is having challenges. But if you just ask the prospect, are you having any challenges today? What are you having challenges with? What are your pain points? Those are not good questions to ask. And our process here to create your sales message will help you to create an optimum set of questions to ask, because what we do is we bring back the pain points we just created and use those to create pain questions to ask about very specific areas, instead of just asking a broad question of what are you having challenges with. And we can also do this to create competitive replacement questions by bringing back the pain points that we can solve that the prospect may have with the competition's product and create pain questions that are laser focused on seeing if the prospect is having any challenges with the product they're using today. The salesperson then goes on to mention that his main problem is as soon as my cold calls touch on time tracking or touch on the product he sells, everyone shuts down. So the proper way to address this challenge would be for this salesperson to watch the How to Cold Call module in our training program. And in this module, we actually provide a structured cold call process that goes through all of these different steps. And everything discussed in this video will help you to make small changes that will decrease how much and how quickly prospects shut down on you when you're cold calling. For example, one of the key concepts that we focus on with our cold calling module, also our cold emailing module, really our whole sales program, is to make small changes so that you decrease how much you sound like a salesperson that's trying to sell something. The prospects that you're selling to are getting sold to a lot. So as soon as they sense that you're a salesperson trying to sell something, you're going to trigger more guardedness, and that's going to lead to more objections, more rejection, more resistance. What most salespeople do is they use more of a product selling approach. This is who I work for. This is what we sell. Are you looking to make a change? Do you have any needs in this area? Now, if you're reaching out saying, I'm with company X, we sell time tracking software. How are you doing with your current time tracking software? You are using a product selling approach. The main thing with the product selling approach is that it triggers guardedness. That will lead to you getting shut down most likely unless you happen to cold call a prospect that happens to know that they need new time tracking software. So what you can do to decrease how quickly and how strongly a prospect tries to shut you down is you can change to a more consultative selling approach. And that's where you're focusing more on your improvements and asking questions. And then you introduce your product and solution towards the end of the cold call after you've identified ways that your software could potentially help the prospect. And so that cold call training module will go into this in more detail, but one small change you can do is when you're opening the call and you share the purpose for the call, focus on the benefits that you can help to solve. The reason for my call is we help businesses to decrease the labor costs for their hourly workers. What I shared there could be a value proposition created by time tracking software. Notice I'm not talking about my product. I'm not talking about my company. I'm just sharing my value proposition. Then I might do a soft sales takeaway, but I'm not sure if that fits with what you guys are needing. And that's why I'm reaching out if I could ask you a question or two. And then you go on to ask one of your questions. And then, like I said, it's not until the end of the cold call that you introduce your solution. And I would guess just based on the problem of as soon as I talk about time tracking, they shut down. It sounds like you're not introducing the time tracking at the end of the cold call. It sounds like that's probably coming up at the beginning. The salesperson then goes on to mention basically that whenever he asks pain questions, he gets responses like, we're all taken care of, we don't need any help, we don't have any pain, and so on. And there are a few different things to talk about here. First of all, this goes back to a previous question I have for this salesperson, which is what are the questions you're asking to look for pain? And there can often be room for improvement in how you compose your questions. For example, if you just take a pain point and then stick a do you have in the front of it to create a do you have a challenge with blank type of pain question, that question right there is a closed question, which can be answered with a yes or no. If you simply change that question to be a more open-ended question by asking about how do you feel about this particular area, how concerned are you about this, how important is it for you to do this, that small change could help you to improve your ability to uncover pain or at least get more of a conversation going with the prospects. But let's just assume that the pain questions are optimized and that they're good. And when you ask your pain question, you're going to get some sort of response from the prospect. Regardless of the type of response from the prospect, you have a few different directions to go. You could comply with the response, which is if they say we're fine, you could say, okay, I'll let you go, have a nice day. I recommend you do that after asking a few different questions. So another way to go is to ask a follow-up question. So you asked about pain or something about a particular area. The prospect gives you a response. You could drill into that area with a follow-up question to learn more about that particular area. Another option you have is to ask a different pain question. So you asked about one area, they say, no, we're good. Okay, well then ask about another type of pain point that you help to solve. Keep the conversation going. Another option you have is to mix in your current state questions. So you asked about a particular area and they say, no, we're fine. Then follow that up with a current state question. Oh, I see. Well, how long have you been doing that? Oh, what are you using for that? Oh, what is the process for that? Now, what this does is this helps you to keep the conversation going when the prospect starts to shut you down by saying, no, we're fine and we're taken care of in that area. This will also help you to gather more information from the prospect. And as you learn more, two things are going to happen. You will be able to identify that the prospect truly does not have a need for what you sell, and you can walk away with confidence knowing that there's not an opportunity there, and you can move on to spend your valuable time looking for better prospects. Or with the information you gather with your follow-up questions, you might uncover an area where there is potential for a need, and that creates a justification for keeping the conversation going and for closing for the next step in your sales process. Another helpful thing to think about here is, what are you trying to close the prospect for? You sell time tracking software. If you're in product selling mode, you might be cold calling prospects and selling the product. And while you cannot sell time tracking software over the phone and over a cold call, what a lot of salespeople do is they close the prospect by trying to validate interest and need in what they sell. And what that looks like is, on a cold call, they might say, are you looking to improve your time tracking software? I sell time tracking software. Are you interested in time tracking software? Do you have a need in time tracking software? That type of discussion during a cold call is focused on selling the product, even though you're not trying to take the order right there. And what you can do instead is focus more on the next step in your sales process, which is simply talking more in the form of a longer conversation by selling the meeting, setting the appointment. And this shift in approach and shift in your mindset and what you're focused on can completely transform everything you talk about during a cold call, including how you respond and get around objections. When you face all of these objections, I'm not interested, we already used someone today, we're not making any changes, we do not have any budget right now. If you're selling the product and you get one of these objections are actually a valid reason to stop talking and to end the phone call. But if you're completely in the mode of selling the next step in the sales process and start a real conversation, these same objections actually become invalid. The fact that the prospect is already using someone today is a valid reason to not buy your product. It is not a valid reason to not have a conversation. The fact that the prospect does not have money to spend is a valid reason for them not to buy your product today because they don't have any money, but it's not a valid reason to end the conversation. And the shift in mindset can become the basis and structure for your objection responses. So the prospect says, hey, you know what? We actually don't have any budget right now. I understand, and I'm not reaching out to try to sell you guys anything. I don't even know if we're a good fit with what you guys need. That's why I'm just looking to start the conversation between our two organizations. And pause real quick. At this point, I could either ask a question, are you guys having challenges with this? What are you doing for that? Or I could go for the close, which would look like, it would probably make sense for us to have a conversation. You guys have a lot of hourly employees. We are experts in the area of tracking time and do a lot of interesting things. I don't want to talk about those with you on a cold call. Let's schedule some time to talk. It doesn't have to be today or next week. We're not going anywhere. But at some point, let's line up our calendars. I'd like to learn a little bit more about you and how you're using my competitor's product. And I can share some information on us and how we're different. That way, if you ever run into any problems or have any challenges, you can know who we are, you can keep us in mind, and if it ever makes sense to explore this in more detail, then we can pick up right there. Is that fair? Can we put some time on the calendar? And that objection response that I just rattled through, you don't have to memorize it, and it's easy to say if you really come to terms with what you're focused on trying to do and sell to the prospect. The other thing to keep in mind if you have prospects giving you these objection responses is that when you're doing cold outreach, it's most likely the case that the prospects that you're reaching and talking to are not in buying mode for what you sell. If you sell time tracking software, at the moment they're reading your cold email or answer your call, they most likely are not Googling time tracking software providers at that exact moment. And with that, when you try to use your product selling sales pitch on a cold call, you're going to create this mismatch where you're trying to sell your product and the prospect is not in buying mode for your product. And that leads to you getting shut down and facing objections like we're all good and we don't need what you sell. And that's another reason why you need to shift your mindset from selling the product to selling the conversation. And that will improve your ability to start the conversation. And it's then where you can learn more about the prospect and find opportunities and then build interest and generate leads. One last thing to talk about, the scenario where the prospect shuts you down with one of these objections. Because getting shut down completely is part of sales. Even if you do everything right, you're still going to face objections that you can't get around and prospects that completely shut you down. And my question for this salesperson is, what are you doing then? If the prospect says, we don't need any help, we're taken care of, are you closing that account and then moving on to cold call a different account? And the reason why I ask that is because selling B2B time tracking software, there are many different people to talk to. I'll just assume you sell software that you're calling into IT. Now, IT is one of the worst departments to call into. There are more salespeople calling into IT than any of the other departments. You have the software guys, you have the hardware guys, services, recruiting, and probably others. So these people are getting inundated with cold emails and cold calls, difficult to get on the phone, and they'll shut you down. The other thing about IT is that they're usually not strategic. They usually see things from a technical standpoint and don't look at the big picture. That's why it's usually more productive to sell into the business unit. Time tracking software impacts employees. You could most likely sell time tracking software into HR. And finance is the department that manages costs, so they probably care about the tracking of time of employees as well as operations does. So there are many different people to call, departments to call into, different levels. But when you do reach that final point, you have other options and other people to call. And the salesperson ends his email with a question, do you think cold calling makes sense in my market? And this is a very understandable question for the salesperson because he's making these cold calls, getting shut down, all the prospects, they don't have any pain and they don't need what he sells. So he feels like he's wasting his time. And my answer to that is that yes, cold calling can be grinding work. It can take a lot of effort and time and call attempts to simply get another human on the phone. But the phone is one tool you have for communicating with the prospect. And if you don't include the phone in your mix, you will be missing opportunities. And I often use a golf analogy to explain why. When you play golf, you'll play with a bag of different clubs. Each club can hit the ball a different amount of distance with a different level of accuracy. The more distance the club hits the ball, the less accurate it is. And you could view your sales and marketing and communication tools as being similar. You have a few different options for reaching out and communicating with prospects. You could cold call them, you can email them, you can use social media, you can do networking, and maybe others. Now, each of those communication methods is similar to your bag of golf clubs. They will deliver your message different distances with different accuracy in terms of your message being delivered to the person you're trying to communicate with. Going back to golf, the driver hits the ball the furthest, but it is the least accurate. And the putter hits the ball the shortest distance, but it is the most accurate. And you could compare the driver to sending out emails. You can send out thousands of emails in just a couple minutes, but the accuracy in terms of who's receiving your email, who's actually opening it, who you're communicating with, it's less accurate. The cold call is similar to the putter. Cold calling takes a lot of effort and time, but when you get someone on the phone, you have that person-to-person communication, so you have extreme accuracy in terms of what you're trying to communicate and say being delivered to the person you're communicating with. And with golf, we would never want to play a round of golf with only our clubs that hit the ball a long way because we would lose the accuracy around the hole. So our score would be much higher and our performance would be much less without the accuracy of the putter. We also would not want to play a round of golf only with our putter because we would have to hit the ball a tremendous amount more and spend a lot more energy. So while we're being incredibly accurate, our energy and time expenditure will be much more and our results will be much less. And that's the same exact thing with sales and marketing. If the only thing you're doing is cold calling, you're going to be spending a lot of time, very frustrated, very tired, and your results will be really low. And if you have a strategy where you never pick up the phone and you don't call anyone, you're going to be missing a lot of opportunities without that accuracy of the human-to-human communications. So yes, pretty much regardless of what you sell, there should be some element of cold calling and using the phone in your sales strategy, but it should be part of a mix. You should use other tools like email automation, email blasts, email marketing, and social media to deliver your message and broadcast to a large audience, and then figure out how to strategically use your valuable time to pick up the phone and call certain prospects. And to show you an example of what I'm talking about, actually in SalesScripter, I have an email campaign that's selling our software of SalesScripter to about 6,000 different prospects. And it would take a tremendous amount of time to call and get a hold of these prospects. So we have this set up to where these prospects are on an email campaign and they get a personalized email at a frequency of 1 per week. And every email includes a link for the prospect or the contact to click on. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to use email automation to hit the ball a long way with us spending very little time and effort. But then we need to reach out to these prospects in order to hit the ball in the hole and close the deal. And the great thing about this model is that as these emails are going out to these prospects, we are collecting all of the email opens and links clicked. And SalesScripter will give a contact 1 quality point for an email open and 3 quality points when they click a link in an email. And we can use the data of quality points to greatly improve our decision making on who we're going to call. But where you really see the power in this is when we go to the bottom of the list. Because not only are there prospects with 0 points, there are actually prospects with negative points. And these are prospects that we are not going to waste our valuable time reaching out to. Whereas we can see these contacts are engaging with our emails. So not only will they likely know who we are and be warmed up, but we can be assured that these are prospects that are worth us spending our valuable time calling. And that is pretty much it. Hopefully there's a tip or two in there that you can apply to your sales efforts. So if you want more information, the best place to go is salesscripter.com. Thanks for being here. Hope this was helpful, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.